would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent.
They'll be screaming, dying, praying when that hell bomb falls.
On August 6th and August 9th of 1945, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were razed by the first and only uses of atomic bombs in warfare. The weapon, developed during the top-secret Manhattan Project, was the culmination of years of work done by a team of scientists led by physicist Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, a brilliant yet controversial figure, played a crucial role in the project, pushing the boundaries of science and technology to unlock the power of the atom. But with great power comes great responsibility, and the impact of Oppenheimer's work on the Manhattan Project would create social, political, and scientific frontiers, even years after the project had ended.
Then, in 1939, some scientists were experimenting with transmutation of uranium. What would happen, they wondered?
Nuclear fission, the process that forms the basis of the atomic bombs, was discovered by German radiochemists Otto Hahn, Lisa Meitner, and Fritz Strassmann. They found that the nucleus of uranium could split into two elements when struck by neutrons, releasing an enormous amount of energy in the process. When World War II broke out following the invasion of Poland, Nazi Germany was already ahead in the race to develop fission weapons. Many prominent US physicists, including Enrico Fermi, who communicated the discovery of fission to the United States, called for a halt to publishing any research that could assist the Nazi atomic program. Additionally, Albert Einstein wrote a letter to then-President Franklin Delano Roosevelt on August 2, 1939, urging him to initiate a search for a stable supply of fissile material and increase funding for nuclear research. In response, Roosevelt created the Uranium Committee, but did not yet start an atomic weapons program. However, with the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by the Imperial Japanese in 1942, the U.S. entered the war.
December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
In an effort to quickly end the war and prevent a Nazi monopoly on nuclear weapons, Roosevelt launched the Manhattan Project, placing it under the command of General Leslie Groves. The race was now on to complete an atomic bomb before the Nazis did. On October 8, 1942, General Groves met with Robert Oppenheimer, a charismatic 25-year-old and prominent international scientist teaching physics at UC Berkeley. Leslie Groves, recognizing Oppenheimer had the knowledge and charisma to lead the project, named him the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, despite their conflicting views and Oppenheimer's lack of a Nobel Prize. Oppenheimer would also influence Groves to create Los Alamos as a central research facility where the bomb would be built.
He suggested to Groves that they should build a secret city, secret town, up in the mountains of New Mexico and bring all these physicists and chemists and engineers into one place, put them behind barbed wire, and allow them to freely talk to each other and collaborate.
From 1942 to 1945, Los Alamos researched methods to take enriched uranium and plutonium gathered from Oak Ridge and Hanford and construct them into bombs. Throughout all of this, Oppenheimer skillfully managed groups of highly intelligent scientists under his leadership, becoming involved in all aspects of the bomb, from the living quarters of the scientists to the design of the bombs. Without his leadership, the Manhattan Project would not have progressed as fast as it did. The bomb designs were finalized in 1944 and tested 210 miles away from Los Alamos during the Trinity test of July 16, 1945. Oppenheimer had become the first to practically harness nuclear energy, creating a scientific frontier and opening a Pandora's box. In the August of 1945, President Truman made the decision to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in an attempt to coerce Japan into unconditional surrender and thus protect more American lives. At this point in the war, U.S. casualties were rising, particularly after the battles at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The invasion of mainland Japan was expected to result in an additional 250,000 casualties. The bombs caused massive destruction and, as Truman had predicted, resulted in Japan's unconditional surrender, leading the public to hail Robert Oppenheimer as a hero. However, Oppenheimer himself did not see things that way and carried the burden of creating a weapon of mass destruction.
And she could hear him sort of whispering, those poor little people, shaking his head. And she said, Robert, what are you talking about? What are you muttering? And he explained that, he understood that the bomb was going to soon be used on a Japanese city, and that most of the victims were going to be women and children and old men. And they were the poor little people he was muttering about.
Robert Oppenheimer's work had created a geopolitical frontier by giving the US a monopoly on atomic bombs and making it a post-war superpower, significantly disrupting the global balance of power. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki also demonstrated to the American public the destructive potential of nuclear energy, leading to the atomic age. The atomic age was characterized by a rise in American nationalism, as well as both optimism and fear about the potential of nuclear energy. Many people began to envision a future powered by nuclear energy, seeing its great potential. Oppenheimer himself was hopeful about the peaceful uses of atomic energy, but wanted to prevent its military use, advocating for the creation of an international atomic authority. Although he was not successful in its establishment, he did have a significant impact on a transfer of control of US nuclear weapons from military to a civilian agency. The development and launch of the Soviet Union's atomic bomb in 1949, which was aided by information obtained through the infiltration of the Manhattan Project, sparked fear among the American public about the possibility of nuclear war and foreign enemies infiltrating the US government. This period of US history, marked by political turmoil, is also known as the Red Scare. With the Red Scare would also come the rise of McCarthyism. During this time, the Rosenbergs were convicted of selling nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union and executed. Robert Oppenheimer, due to his philosophical views and refusal to work on the hydrogen bomb, became caught up in the Red Scare and faced a security hearing in 1953, which resulted in the revocation of his security clearance. The Red Scare, which was directly caused by a leak of Oppenheimer's research, had created a political frontier, as it forced the US government to start securing its bureaucracy and led to the rise of anti-communist sentiment. The Soviet Union's possession of atomic bombs had also created a social frontier, as the introduction of a legitimate nuclear threat reshaped society to start preparing for a nuclear conflict. The bilateral possession of atomic weapons would also create a geopolitical frontier by ending the US's monopoly on these weapons, dramatically shifting the balance of power, leading to the start of the Cold War, and fundamentally altering the way that war is waged. Robert Oppenheimer's research not only helped to prevent the deaths of hundreds of thousands of US soldiers in World War II, but also inadvertently saved the lives of the Japanese civilians who would have been surely wiped out by the invasion of the mainland. The use of atomic bombs carried the risk of potentially ending humanity if a major conflict between the US and the Soviets would arise, which would nearly happen during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Oppenheimer's research was also further developed on during the Cold War arms race, leading to the creation of hydrogen bombs and intercontinental ballistic missiles, which increased the fear and threat of nuclear conflict. In a way, these inventions also helped to prevent nuclear war through the concept of mutually assured destruction, which stated that both countries would be destroyed in an event of a nuclear war, regardless of which one struck first. The fear of nuclear conflict persists today due to nuclear proliferation, with many more countries possessing nuclear weapons. This has led to a focus on preventing further proliferation in modern diplomacy, even after the official end to the Cold War. One example of this is the international diplomatic efforts to halt Iran's nuclear program. However, Oppenheimer's research has been used for peaceful purposes, such as the development of emission-free energy production through fission reactors, which has become increasingly relevant with the current focus on combating climate change and promoting green energy. Oppenheimer's legacy is complex and multifaceted, with his scientific achievements being both celebrated and criticized for their potential to save and destroy humanity.
And to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.